Thank you very much for the nice introduction. And it's always very thrilling to come to Berlin. Some days ago, the wall was torn down 30 years ago. This is a very important part of my history too. I will not go much in for that. But for me, I think it was Carl Jung sometimes, he said once that in all the cosmos there's enormous chaos. But he said then in all the disorder there's an order. And I think it's very much a reassumption of my life, disorder and order. I always like to draw. I never learned to make any drawings with computer. So I'm a kind of real amateur. But every day it's like opera singer like to do the elemental things of singing with the voice. I draw every day. I think it's very relaxing. I think it's very important for me. And I think drawing is a fantastic language that you learn as a child and you can keep all your life. And I think everyone can draw, but people at a certain age get afraid of drawing. I come from a little town called Oslo, which is the capital of Norway. It used to be, when I grew up, a city much more like Eastern Europe. It was not so wealthy as now, and like in the grocery stores, it was like potatoes, carrots, and cabbage. Sometimes onions too. But what was really nice that around my city was surrounded by nature, and even if had not so much wealth in those years, we had this enormous closeness to nature. So we kind of grew up in the city, which you can from your house go out with ski out in the woods, and I think that very much has been deep into me ever since where I have been. My mother, she had an architecture studio, and I didn't want to become an architect at all. I saw all her depressions with difficult clients, bad economy, too stress, too much work, quarrelling with my father, not have time with the children, and so forth. So then I want to become a dancer. That, of course, I thought was a very optimistic plan, but to become a dancer, that is something I, at a certain point, understood that was not for me, even if I still today love dancing so much. And I think dance and music, it's really the art where I really think that if you see a piece of music and see a piece of dance, it makes a really impression on you. And I think that we are reducing all the rationality in our lives. We go to school and we dislearn the really instinct that we have in us. And I think that dance and music really kind of manage to open up our hearts. And I think all of us are really attached to music and listen to that very often. I lived 1 year in the United States, then I became very radical. I didn't appreciate to live in the United States. Everyone had a car, everyone were driving, no one walking. You went to the shopping mall. It was a very depressing way of living. So I wanted to study abroad. So all my friends who went abroad, they went to like England, Germany, and like or even to New York. I wanted to go to Italy, and I thought that was very interesting. I went to study in Venice, and it was so breathtaking for my life. I studied very slow. I lived in Venice for about 10 years. It's very good to do things slow sometimes when you have the chance. But what I discovered in Venice is actually my architecture education is more from the spaces and the streets, and even if I'm not religious, I went into a church every morning. And I think Venice is kind of course, it's so beautiful. It's been ruined by tourism and even by nature now. We see the Acqua Alta. But I learned so much what the rules we have in architecture in Norway, They tell everything is forbidden that's shown in Venice. You would have put into jail in Norway if you designed Venice in Norway. But the dimensions and the way of living, and that really made an impact on me. And then for my life, I was really lucky to find a person that I love and that I work and I see every day. And of course, we also quarrel, but this is Kristin, who is with me now. She's the CEO of our architecture company, and we live together. And when we had small children, some years in advance, I had a traffic accident, and I biked everywhere. And I was hit by a car, and little by little, my legs didn't function anymore. I could not walk anymore, and they said I should be in a wheelchair rest of my life. So then I searched, and I found 3 people on the planet that could do anything for me. But that was, I chose to have a surgery in Milan, and this person, magic person, he saved my legs. That's something magic. And from that moment, I was 10 months in a place to learn to walk again. And from that moment, I am really humble for everything, and I'm really thankful for every day. And I love my family. Kristin and we had 2 children. They are twins. They're August and Sophie. They are born with 10 minutes apart. And I was very optimistic because I quit my work at the university, a paid job, and started my office the same month we got children. It was a very kind of naive business plan. And I even had my architecture studio at home with the children and Kristin. So the business plan was, the foundations was made out of passion, and there were no clients, but 2 very hungry kids. And if you saw on this picture, if you have been not cut out, you will see we also have a cat in our house that he is actually our boss. We are the slaves of this animal. We love him very much, and he sleeps. I also think that after this accident, I kind of rediscovered art, as I like to go to all exhibitions, and I got so stressed because of my work, and then I kind of rediscovered that art. This is a painting made of a really good friend of ours. It's a kind of very huge, big-scale painting, and I think the art we need more than ever. We need more to explore our senses. Technology and science can be rational, but we see that technology and science doesn't show us the way. So I think that art is very much interesting, and I think also in arts we can find something very fundamental, questions about moral, and of course you can see in our lives we really need much more empathy in our world towards each other and towards our environment and towards the other living creatures. And I really think we talk so much about sustainability, but I think it's like a void. It's like a shell with formalism. We talk about this, but I really think the game change is empathy, that we have to start with. We cannot start with juridical laws and terms and save the planet. It's our attitude, actually, that must change. And also, there's this expression, if you go out in the streets and everywhere, there's always sounds between you. So I came up, this is the north of Norway. I come up and I discovered that silence was so present. So silent kind of became the new loudness. I think all our senses is telling something. We are doing much analysis in our system, but really our gut feeling, our intuition, it's so much more important. And the senses that we use in our daily life, even very often not thinking of it, touching something, hearing something, for me, that is coming the guideline of everything that actually we do. And I also think that this is important, that everyone deserves sometimes in their life to really connect with nature and really connect with the silence and really feel it and be in it and present in it. I also think that the cycles of nature is under pressure, and it's I feel very difficult also for the really young generation, and that we must be optimistic even if all signs are very kind of bad in a way. And if everyone can kind of contribute, this is something that is inside of me that maybe my childhood is not very kind of clear, but this seems to be more and more clear. And I also, if you think of history, this is a detail of a painting of Hieronymus Bosch. And Hieronymus Bosch, for me, has always been since I was a childhood. I had the opportunity to look at the books of my mother and father and then later look up these great paintings. For me, these are also guidelines. And also think this is a detail of a painting which is telling about a apocalyptic kind of perspectives to the world. But inside there, you see these two people in this kind of transparent shell. It's almost like a fish shell. And I think that is very much, for me, what architecture is. It's outside your skin. There's a boundary. Inside, it's your inner life. Outside, there's your outer life. And then architecture, in a way, is our clothes, is our biggest clothes, which are talking about both actually who we are and what kind of places we live. It's kind of layers for climate and for culture. So then inside this little sphere, we find these two people that are finding their little private sphere. So architecture very much kind of relates to this kind of this different kind of sphere that we have. I also think that for me, it has meant since I was a very small boy that the ocean has been the mother of everything, and relating to the ocean is extremely important. We talk about all the ocean plastic, everything, and I think that we should have more concerns about the ocean. And of course, how are you working? How are you living? What kind of methods? All this, for me, important columns of existence of who I am is actually very much anchored to now this old house where we both live, and we also have our office. There's kind of in modernism it was said you should stick to your guards, do what you do. You should not be your own client. So that we have been. You should not work in the place where you live. That we do. We should not work with who you have married to. That we do, and so forth. So I kind of I was very much out in the corridor at school because not following the rules. And I do think that how is like if you take modernism was a very important thing at a certain point because it gives sanitary conditions for people. But then we have been stick to the modernism's way of thinking too long. There is the place of work, but of course you live in another place. But that place is so in beginning the factories were so polluting that they said the workers must live there, if not they die too early. But then there's too ugly to have your spare time, so you have a third place where we have recreation. So this is the trying work, home, recreation is kind of that makes the world travel and makes the transport and mobility problems of our world. We need to learn from Venice. We need to walk to work. We need to find our daily life everything that we need and desire within 5-10 minutes. We need to quit to take car. We need to walk. That is so. All the rules of regulations in all cities should change. Everything is kind of outdated, I do believe. But we have also in our studio, we have an internship. We have a small private architecture school where we have 5 students coming every year, and we kind of relearn them everything. And so in 1 year, they become fantastic in the way they're in dynamic things. So in this house, this is the place where we like to work. I don't like to work in office. I like to work in spaces that I belong to. So if it functions. Thank you.